Welcome to another episode of Between Drafts. I'm Nat.
Nathan.
And today we're going to be talking about writing novellas, why and how we're doing them, but we're also going to do some updates, talk about some author growth strategies for building an audience.
Substack mainly.
Yeah, Substack particularly. We've been looking at, what else did we have here? And just some other updates from how our books are going.
Yeah.
So how's it going with the editor? Because you sent it off last week, right?
Sent it on Monday.
Okay.
He got sick for a week, so
too bad.
delayed a week, totally fine. Sent it Monday, which is 3-4 days ago now, and we'll see.
Now it's in his hands.
Yeah, he said he's going to send updates every 2-ish weeks,
Cool.
Which I thought was good. And the whole process would take 6 to 8.
Great. Yeah, I think we talked about this before. I liked what you told me about his process where he sends you feedback as he's going. It's not just a black box where you get a PDF at the end.
Yeah.
It seems like a big improvement.
Yeah. And we have agreed upon deliverables for the end, but the kind of mid steps are a little more vague. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I get back.
Totally. What are you doing in the meantime?
Working on Novella.
Okay.
Launching this like short form course. And what's the third thing? I think there's a third thing I'm doing.
Newsletter?
Yeah. That's kind of business as usual though, so I don't even think about it.
I know, it's funny how it's just like these are my weekly requirements for work. They like don't count as work. It's like, well, no, I still have a lot of work.
Yeah.
Tell me about the course.
It's good.
Or what's it about?
Short form nonfiction storytelling, all written. So this is what I like, bread and butter, work with clients on, do it a lot for myself. So I basically start super high level, tenets of story, causation, transformation, conflict, progress. And then we get into like the 4 elements of a scene. You've seen this, the action, dialogue, description, interiority. It goes super deep on all 8 of those things. So that's like, I don't want to just give somebody, here's the hero's journey applied to an essay. Like that's not really helpful. I want them to understand what makes the story tick, why it works, and then show them the frameworks and say, oh, you see this step in this very popular framework. This works because it's about like the dark night of the soul, this transformation, which is essentially the lowest point for the character, which in this case would be you. But it also, like, the reason it works is not because you're in a shitty situation. The reason it works is because you're in a shitty situation that forces you to either change or stay the same. If you change, you can overcome that situation. If you stay the same, you can't. So it's a go or no go spot. And that's what makes most of these type of stories tick.
Sweet.
You see it in like Pathless Path, Paul, whether he does it on purpose or not, he does it a lot.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole thing.
Your bit from our Q&A episode on making external conflict internal was very popular. We got good feedback on that.
That's include that in the course as well. So, yeah.
And that's going to be through World Builders?
Yep.
Cool.
That'll be through the newsletter.
And then I guess the other thing we were talking about with that was migrating to Substack.
Yes.
So you're going to move World Builders over to Substack then?
So I love Beehive.
Yeah.
So I cannot say enough good things about them. I think that the newsletter world is splitting, and I think it's a good thing, into places for newsletters as a brand and places for writers who happen to distribute their writing through newsletters right now.
It's a good differentiation.
Like you used to do a long form blog, now you have a Substack. I think that is a perfect example of writer. The medium you're somewhat agnostic with, you'll use whatever medium is best for the day.
Right.
That used to be a blog, now it's Substack.
Yeah.
So for me, and I have a bunch of friends on Substack, I recommend each other, all that good stuff. The Note platform is very powerful. I was hesitant because I was like, I don't really want my email list tied into a social platform.
Yeah.
I'm kind of sold. And on the Beehive side, I think it's wonderful if you are planning to monetize, like you want to build a newsletter as a brand and potentially sell that newsletter. I recommend Beehive for sure, 100%. Awesome platform, analytics, automations, the whole shebang at a good price. So I'm going to do the wait list for the book on Beehive
Cool.
because I care way more about the analytics and being able to segment people out and things like that you can't do on Substack. So I'll use Beehive for that. So I'm not really ditching Beehive.
Cool.
It's just separating the two functions.
Yeah, I was hesitant about putting my newsletter on. Well, I wasn't when I first got on Substack because there was no notes feature.
Yeah. Oh, you were an early adopter.
Yeah, I was pretty early on it.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
I know, this is like my blessing and curse. I'm good at being early to things, but sometimes I'm just too early and try everything and get fractured across 100 platforms. But I got on Substack pretty early, and then when they added notes, I was hesitant for the same reason I think you just mentioned, which is now their incentive is almost less to drive subscribers and more to drive the growth of this social network. And one thing I noticed was that when I went into my Substack analytics, it was defaulting to showing me my follower growth and not my subscriber growth because it started as the same number and then they started to diverge.
So very, very quickly, for anybody not familiar, subscriber just means you get their email and can send them emails, and follower just means they hit the button on like Twitter or Substack or whatever.
Although it's a little weird because when you're on Substack Notes, their Twitter competitor, the default button in the feed is subscribe.
I've accidentally hit that button and then I've been like, unsubscribe.
Yeah. But the two things kind of changed my mind on it. One is that Substack makes all of their money from paid subscriptions.
Yep.
So ultimately, they want to help people grow their subscriber base.
That's such a fascinating and unique incentive that no other platform has.
I'm worried they're not going to be able to do it forever. I wish they weren't venture backed.
They're big time venture backed, right?
Big time venture backed. They raised a lot of money, and they are not, as far as I can tell from the outside, I do not see how they earn a venture scale return with their current business model. I could be wrong. Like, I hope I'm wrong because I don't want them to have to start doing ads, but it feels like there's going to need to be some other monetization. But at least for now, they are incentivized to get you subscribers. And what I was telling you before the show is something I noticed. I started getting much more active on Notes a month ago. And obviously my follower count has started growing faster. I mean, that's just to be expected. And the thing I didn't expect was that my subscriber count has gone up too. And so that's great. So it's not just followers that are going up, subscribers are growing faster as well. But also, I'm pretty sure Substack is putting my old popular posts in people's feeds more than it was. Because I have this one post, and I think I've told you this about this before, like I hate this post because this is the like stupid one that I voice dictated in the car on the way to the office one day and then made no edits and just shipped it. And it's the most popular thing I've ever written. Not technically. It's the most popular Substack piece I've ever written.
It's close.
Like,
it's top three.
It's up there. Yeah. If we don't count SEO traffic, I think it's the most popular one I've written. And when I started posting on Notes, it had plateaued around 900 likes, which is a lot of likes for a post. But I looked at it today and it was up to 1.1 thousand. So it gained another 200 likes in the last month without me doing anything.
And that's on the newsletter post.
That's on the newsletter post. And it's from 2 years ago. And I didn't distribute it. Nobody linked to it as far as I know. And so I think it's getting put in people's feeds. And then something happened today where, do you know who Oliver Burkeman is?
Yes.
Yeah, the author of 4,000 Weeks.
Yeah.
He featured one of my old posts in his newsletter. And maybe it's just a coincidence, right? Like maybe he just found it or somebody found it. He said somebody sent it to him. So maybe somebody found it and said, hey, I think you'd like this. But I have a hunch that they found it because it got put in their notes feed. Because again, it's a 3-year-old post. I'm not promoting it.
How else are you finding that?
How else are you finding it? And so if you have evergreen content that's not just like weekly stuff, there's no other social network that's doing that.
YouTube,
you're right. Yeah. No other writing related
Yes.
network where you get that kind of an effect. So that's been pretty cool to see.
I mean, that's so powerful.
Yeah. So definitely spending more time on Notes and liking that as a growth channel. Do you know any fiction writers who are doing a really good job on Notes?
It's really hard because I think that can mean a couple different things. I've seen fiction writers who write about writing on Notes.
Yeah, or on Substack, I guess.
Yes, on Substack. That does well.
Yeah.
I've seen fiction writers who write fiction on Substack Notes. I've, on average, seen it do less well.
Yeah.
But it's very cool. It just, I've never seen fiction done well on a social network. I've tried it, and it's hard to do well.
Maybe it kind of makes sense. People just aren't looking to get lost in a story if they're on short form media.
Right. You're scrolling Twitter or Notes. Like,
Yeah.
I think it probably does better if you specifically share short stories on your newsletter.
Yeah.
But I haven't totally seen it. It's just not where I consume fiction.
Yeah.
I consume fiction in books.
Totally. Same.
Personally.
The last thing on that I just thought of was there's this funny post that went viral, I think last week, talking about how if you say you can write a book, you'll get 1,000 likes.
Yeah.
You say here's how to write a book, it's 100 likes. I wrote a book, it's 10 likes. Which honestly is really true. My announcement post for Husk on Substack, nobody engaged with, like on Notes. And this happened when I announced Crypto Confidential too. It was like one of my least liked posts of anything that I wrote for a period. And I mean, it drove sales, it worked, it got the message out, but it got almost no engagement on the platform. And when I posted a note about it, that didn't get any engagement either. But then I make a silly post about like, if you want to write, don't like read books about writing, right? Don't listen to podcasts about writing, right? Like, don't take my advice. Yeah, and that got 2,000 likes or something crazy, right? So,
underneath, you're like, oh, by the way.
Yeah, by the way. Exactly. Yeah, here's my SoundCloud link.
Yeah.
But we are also talking about writing books today because this is not notes. So Novellas. How's your novella stuff going?
Slow, because I've been focusing
on the course.
Well, that and since I had an extra week to get the editor stuff, I was like, I might as well make more improvements
more tweaks.
To the story.
What did you change?
I changed some of. There's one character. He is an antagonist, Justinian, and he was a pretty typical antagonist for that role. So I twisted a little bit of what you would expect from him, but it stemmed from I realized something about how the world would work that would change his character like enough that it made sense to tweak it.
Cool.
And I think it added depth to. He's not a main character, but he's important side character. And I think that was good. It twisted him from like prototypical same age villain to, there's like a little bit of depth here. Cool. You hopefully make the reader care about him before he does some really shitty stuff. Yeah.
I'm out of date on your book. I haven't read a version in a few months now.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'll be curious to see it. I guess after you do the work with the editor, get to read it again.
Yeah.
Is the plan going to be, how are you thinking about what you do after you incorporate his feedback? Are you going to do another past agents?
I don't know. As part of the editing process, he includes a couple hours of sit down, talk through either the edits and the feedback as well as the marketing. Do you self-publish? Do you go through traditional? And I value his experience. He's got great experience, so I'll ask him and see where he goes. I'm pretty committed to the self-publishing thing, to be honest. I feel better and better about it, especially for a first book. We can talk about that another time, but
when you get there.
I'm feeling better about it.
Cool.
In the meantime, it's launched this course, which I think is in a really good spot. Like, I'm very happy with it. I hope you'll find it valuable. And then it's focused on the novella.
Sweet. So how did you decide what to do the novella on? I guess, should we give context on, because you red pilled me on this.
Let's go.
And then I charged very intensely after it.
Yeah.
So explain where the novella idea came from.
There's a great flywheel that I've seen now multiple indie authors do.
Yeah.
Where they'll have their full-length novels, and then they'll have novellas set in the same world.
Yeah.
The thinking being, it's a big ask as a debut author who nobody has heard of to get someone to sit down and read a book for 10 hours. It's a much smaller ask to get them to pay, $2 and 2.5 hours to get them to read a novella.
Yeah.
But it's an entry point into your world. And if you can get someone into your world and they like it, they like your writing, they like the world, the characters, whatever, then the odds that they go to your actual novels, continue to the next novella, way higher.
Yeah.
So that's the idea, is like, how do you get that flywheel working? And the novella is a very, it makes sense as an entry point.
And was Ryan Cahill
he's the first one
that
I
you
saw.
Okay. So who else have you seen do this well?
So actually this one guy who's traditionally published, Christopher, I don't want to butcher his last name, Rucchio, whose books are Empire of Silence.
Yeah.
Which I've bought the first 3 and I want to read them. I haven't read them yet. But he also does
He got a bunch of awards for Empire of Silence, didn't he?
I think so. They're like quite popular, quite good. But he does similar things where he has other books in the series, or not in the series, but in the world.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because I'm pretty sure he's traditionally published. And then there's some other self-published authors. I'm terrible. I'm forgetting their names.
When you turned me on to it, I realized the Leviathan Wakes guys did this too. They did one big Leviathan Wakes book every year, like clockwork, but then they also released a novella every fall that expanded on like some part of the story, usually related to what happened in the main book.
It's fun because you can add Easter eggs and go deeper on characters who would never get screen time otherwise.
Yeah, totally. So are you going to do it where your novella could be read out of order, like where it could be read first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know because Cahill talked about that in, I think, the interview you sent me, where he said that like his fans actually argue now about which one is supposed to be read first, which is cool. Yeah. That's a pretty neat effect to have. And I checked on Amazon before we recorded. His novella is only 95 pages.
And his
novels are like 1,000 pages.
So it's a huge difference.
So I'm surprised he was able to restrain himself. But yeah, that page range of 100 to 150 feels very digestible.
You can sit down and read it in an afternoon.
It's like one sitting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even like Fahrenheit 451 is only 45,000 words. So it's like 170 pages.
It used to be so much more common because things would be serially published in newspapers or whatever.
Right.
Which naturally led to shorter stories.
Yeah. So I've been working on mine too. And it's funny, I almost immediately ran into the exact reason traditional publishers don't publish novellas.
What's that?
The cost. Because I talked to Scribe, and it's going to cost the same amount to publish the novella as a full-length novel.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so on the one hand, if you think that the novella is just going to be a bonus and might not be the same economic value as the novels, it gets harder to justify it. But on the flip side, if it's this incredible marketing asset, then it's very worthwhile in that sense. So I'm still doing it, but it was kind of funny that.
And then maybe it's you don't do a novella between everyone. You do this one to get people into the world.
There's totally. So many ways you can maybe do fewer of them or something. But it was interesting to see that from the end of like actually hiring a team versus a publisher saying, oh no, we don't want to publish a 35,000 word book. And me as the author saying like, well, why not? Like people want shorter books. And they're saying like, well, no, they don't, because people often see shorter books as less valuable, especially in nonfiction. That's where you hear this a lot. But I'm going to be really curious to see how it does, because I ended up doing the same thing where it's set 100 years before Husk. It's basically like the day the world changes.
Yeah.
And
we're doing the same thing.
Yeah. And it's from the perspective of a character who's going to be very important in the second book. And so part of the second book is going to involve like interacting with this character and like the important knowledge they have, which they hid in this book, the novella, which is actually basically like canon in the Husk universe. So it could definitely be read first as an intro to Husk, or be read after Husk, or even like after they read 2, or if they start 2 and it gets referenced, then they go back and read it and then they finish 2. So I've been having fun with it in that sense. I just finished the draft today. So
How long is it?
38,000 words.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of held yourself back.
Yeah, it's 150 pages. I feel like that's around what I was targeting.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a good length.
It is a good length.
Yeah. I was looking, I think I mentioned this book an episode or 2 ago, The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect.
You did.
It was a good sci-fi novel, and that's like 180 pages. And that was a pretty quick read. So there is something kind of like freeing about going back to the shorter length too. And the other thing I liked, I don't know if you're trying to do this at all, but I also took it as like a bit of a challenge.
In what way?
In the sense of my eagerness is to always get to the next event in the plot, like the next bit of action.
Yep.
And so I tend to like rush between things. And since the novella takes place on one day and it has a bit of this like Canterbury Tales nested story aspect to it, I sort of like can't do that.
Yeah.
I like have to go deeper on certain things, which was a fun exercise because I feel like I ended up finding more in the conversations and drawing out more of the backstory. And it's definitely different from Husk, where Husk gets into the action basically right away. And the novella it's much more of a slow burn, where it starts a lot calmer and then it has this just like big exciting ending, kind of like Drive, or I don't have a good book analogy off the top of my head, but that was kind of fun to do too. Although I always feel like a little afraid that if there's not enough action at the beginning, like nobody's going to read it. But maybe it's easier with a shorter book.
I really think readers, it's like, I don't know, tension is funny because you can like release it through these big scenes throughout, or if you're able to build it up until the end and then release it all at once. I think both can be done well.
Yeah.
It's just different.
Totally. How are you?
Probably harder to do the release all at once at the end.
I think so. Yeah. It definitely felt harder for me. I kept wanting to go back and add more hooky stuff early on, but I'm gonna not look at it for a couple of weeks and then pick it back up and see how I feel about it. Are you thinking about planning it any differently compared to a novel?
Yeah, because with the novel, I'll have a bunch of sequences that turn into scenes and chapters and things. With this, it's like 3 sequences. So
what's a sequence?
So the way I think about it is it's a string of connected scenes that lead to a big culminating thing.
Okay.
So if I was going to break down, like it'd be story, act, sequence, and you can argue scene or chapter or whatever.
Cool.
But that's it. So I would want to give you examples from one of our books, but I feel like I can't.
Yeah, we can't spoil it. It's Star Wars, maybe?
Yeah.
Or
okay, so let's think the first Harry Potter.
Okay.
Very first one.
Yeah.
Most people, I think, know this story. The first sequence, I would argue, leads up to Hagrid telling Harry, "You are a wizard."
Yeah.
That, like, okay, the world's going, weird things are happening. They take the car out to this island. Giant shows up. Like, that's the first sequence.
Payoff, yeah.
That's like, I don't know, 6 or 7 chapters probably. That'd be an example of a sequence.
Cool. Okay.
So I think for me, it's how do I tell a complete story just in 2 sequences instead of 7 or whatever. Yeah. So in terms of planning, that has been difficult. And I think it's the same reason that you said with, you're constrained to one day. Mine's probably more like a week. But it's the same issue,
right?
Where it's, okay, you got to pull out all this stuff from this one thing. Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Fun challenge though. Have you, or I guess, and you've already been thinking about 2 and 3 as well, right? Does
I think it's gonna be 5.
you think 5 now?
Yeah,
Cool.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this actually before sending it to the editor because I wanted to get a few things in there for future books.
That's smart. I'm already running into that problem.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it gives me so much more respect for the authors who write the first book not knowing if it's going to be picked up and like don't really have that much planned for later. Like I think Rowling has talked about this. She didn't have that much of the rest planned. She knew Snape. She knew that part, at least by the time the movies started. But a lot of the world she didn't have planned out beyond the first book. And just kind of like figured it out as she went, which is hardcore.
Especially the that series, it all ties back really well at the end.
Yeah.
Which is probably why the ending was like very well looked upon.
So satisfying.
Yeah,
for sure. Although, I will say, I thought about this recently. My one gripe with the Harry Potter world, I know there are like other gripes with the magic systems and things like that, is that you get this interesting open loop around there being like secret ancient magic, like love, that is incredibly more powerful than any other kind of magic. And it never comes up.
Other than that one
time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
that's true.
There's this separate magic system in the world that gets introduced in the first chapter and then just never gets touched again, which I guess is fine, right? Like it worked. It obviously worked, right? But it would be interesting to like explore like, well, what other ones are there?
I do think that if you're a fantasy reader now, so much of the magic is more like science.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to swing back.
Yeah.
I think Sanderson really popularized that you have to have,
rules.
Exactly.
Stick to them. It has to be like a science.
Yeah. And I think there's some truth to that. Obviously, he's had a ton of success, but I at least see it in myself where I'm like, it can just be magic. I don't have to fully understand everything.
I saw that critique recently of sci-fi, where sci-fi has gotten so focused on sticking to the rules of science, whereas a lot of classical sci-fi was just like, it's a plasma gun, right? It shoots plasma and then you melt, right? And that was good too, right? Like iRobot doesn't explain how the robots work. It doesn't try to...
Star Wars is more fantasy.
Oh yeah, Star Wars is much more fantasy. Star Trek too, right? The ships just zip across the universe, and that's fine. It's just how the world works. Actually, for this, the other book that I'm calling Secret Project that I don't know when I'm going to get to, I really like this idea of coming at it from the other angle of taking fantasy ideas and trying to justify them through sci-fi. So getting to use common fantasy tropes in a modern sci-fi setting has been kind of fun to explore. Because you can kind of justify a lot by like tweaking what's acceptable science or not.
100%.
Yeah. And that's been kind of fun to think about too.
And in my book, I like thinking about, in a way, the theory explains a lot of things that we have no explanation for about history today. Like the pyramids in Egypt, and there's a lot of things there that you're just kind of like, you really think about this?
Yeah.
This is wild.
All the columns under them or whatever.
Yeah.
You see that?
I did see that. I was like, that's kind of dope.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff to think about.
Totally.
But back to the novella, you just finished yours.
Yes.
38,000 words.
Yeah.
1, how do you feel about the draft? And 2, where do you go from there?
I actually feel weirdly good about the draft.
Nice.
In the sense of like, it's going to need improving in terms of word flow, details, things like that. But it's not going to need the big structural changes that took so long with Husk.
That's great.
It's like honestly pretty good. There's little things that I know need to be fixed, but
what do you think led to that?
I was trying to think about that. I think because I'm thinking about how do I do the same thing with Husk 2 and with Secret Project, right? Like,
Yeah, how do you not have
yeah,
to
I mean,
redo
there's
half
just
the
so
thing?
much re-architecting.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, I think a lot of it comes back to nailing the characters and the world
Mhm.
building before getting into it, where I was pretty good with Husk about planning out the plot, but I didn't really know the characters that well going into it. And
Sure.
I didn't have a lot of the world figured out, and I
Mhm.
didn't know where it was going. And I ended up being very happy with where it went because it was way bigger and way cooler than I originally planned, but it required going back and changing a ton of things.
Yep.
Whereas with the novella, I know exactly what the world looks like. I know I know 3 of the 4 characters in it quite deeply at this point. And so,
And you know where it goes.
and I know where it goes. I know what place it serves in the story. And that just made it so much easier to have a plan and follow the plan, but also be surprised by things as I went. Like the same thing happened with the novella as what happened with Husk, where I got to the end and I kind of felt like this ending is fine,
Hmm.
but there might be something else here. And then a much better ending popped out. And I was like, oh, I
Was
didn't.
it a different ending or an extension to the ending you already had
It
that
was an
got
extension.
bigger?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah. It's exactly the same,
Mhm.
where it just felt like a little dissatisfying of a payoff. And then I thought about it some more and I was like, oh, yeah, because this other thing would obviously happen next. And that needs to be in the story too. And I had no plans for that going into it, but it was really cool.
Mhm.
And then I had to go back to Husk and make sure I was allowed to do it. I was like, oh, okay, can we go with this? Yes, we can. Okay, cool, great. It's almost an argument for not explaining things too much in your first book,
Hmm.
because the
Yeah.
less you explain things, the more freedom you have later.
Down the line.
Yeah, Sanderson has this good line in his new lecture recordings where he says, I'm throwing footballs to myself and hoping I catch them 15 years later. And like, that's sort of how it feels sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But no, dude, I think it's going to take way less editing than Husk. I think I'll be done with it in another month or 2
Let's go.
tops. And so that puts me ahead of schedule because I told Scribe I'd deliver it July 1,
Mhm.
but that puts me delivering it like May 1 to June 1. So I can get it out hopefully sooner than I'd planned, which lets me get into Husk 2.
Mhm.
And for Husk 2, it's like I have a very good idea of where it's going to end and what the world is going to look like at the end.
Are you thinking trilogy?
Trilogy. Yeah.
Trilogy.
Trilogy with an option for a follow-on trilogy, kind of like what Red Rising did. There's
Mhm.
a very clear ending at the end of book 3, but then it's a question of like, do I keep going from there? Because
Right.
that ending opens up a lot of new questions that could be fun to explore.
If the series does super well, why
I
not?
want to do it totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know pretty well what the world is going to look like at the end of 2, and I know most of the characters going into it. It's like I have a very good idea of who Isaac and Carmi
Mhm.
and Lena and Vance and all these people are. Shouldn't have said Vance. Okay, I'll cut
That's
that.
okay. It can
um,
be an Easter egg for people.
yeah, right. And Felix and like all of them, right? Like they're much more fully formed. The world is pretty fully formed. The locations are fully formed. And the fun thing with 2 is it's kind of like we were talking about this a bit with a trilogy. What purpose does each book serve?
Right. You can build out this like act by act, but with full
With full books. Yeah.
which is fun.
And book 1 is kind of setting the stage and introducing people to the world. And then book 2 is where the world gets much bigger. The stakes get bigger, the relationships get deeper, the conflicts get deeper.
Mhm.
And usually the protagonist gets like set back in some way to set the stage for the big showdown or whatever in the 3rd book.
Yeah.
And so from that framework and thinking about like what else would be going on in the world, it just like a lot of things made sense. And the big part that I cut from Husk becomes a central part of book 2, which was part of why I ended up cutting it right before the deadline. And so I'm like cautiously optimistic that it's going to be a much easier editing process for 2 than it was for 1, because I'm just like in the flow of the world more.
You're also probably better
I think that helps
writing the
too.
thing.
Yeah.
Telling the story.
Dude, I mean, it really is true about just getting reps in. Like the difference between when I tried to write the first draft of Crypto Confidential to like starting a new draft now, and how prepared I feel and like the ability to hold everything in my head and organize it and have a good plan and feel good about the plan is just night and day.
Yeah.
So that's a good feeling. But I'm excited to get into Husk too. I'm probably going to start it next week while the novella is sitting, because it's like going back to the self-publishing timelines. Yeah, I don't have to wait until January to start production on it. If I finish it in September,
It's fine.
we can start on it then. I could get it out next like February or March, right? Like I don't have to wait until May.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exciting too. So,
Yeah.
but I also want to start on Secret Project because it's a good fucking idea.
It is a good idea.
It's gotten like crazier since I talked about it with you too.
I do think there is a great argument for, at least for the first 2 books, staying kind of on course for that track. Because at least what I've seen, like I've noticed that I usually don't find books on book 1. I usually find it based off of something I see about book 2, 3, 4, even probably 2 or 3 usually. Like Will of the Mini is one of the few where I found
that's the example I was going to give
the
too.
first one,
Yeah,
and had to then wait. But most series I find on book 2 or 3.
Yeah, Red Rising was another one that I'm quite proud. I was like, I think on book 1,
That's pretty good.
maybe 2.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was obsessed with it. He named his first son Darrow.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so he turned me on to it. And then ended up, just reading all of them from there. But yeah, I'm the same. It's always the second or third in the series, which is the argument for doing series, I think. It helps with your marketing a lot if you're putting it in front of
Get a lot of launches.
Exactly. You get a lot of launches, and each launch helps the other launch. And the thing I'm excited about with the novella too is if I time it right, I'm not quite going to hit this, but if we started on the like cover design stuff early, I could have pre-orders on Amazon pretty shortly after Husk comes out. And so it's like as soon as somebody buys the first book, they're waiting for the next one, right? And like that's kind of cool too.
That's super cool.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing I learned recently, because I had to like go through the KDP process and getting it set up on Amazon and everything, is if you have a series on Amazon, most people know this. When you have a series, Amazon groups them together. It says book 1 in the Silo series or whatever. You can click on that and it'll show you all the books in the series. It'll also show you the novellas and stuff in the series that are not in the order. So you can add a book to a series, but not as one of the numbered editions, and it still shows up on that page. And it still shows up as a suggested purchase on Kindle after you finish one of the books in the series. And that's such powerful marketing. Like I finished Neuromancer last night, and on the end page where it asks you to leave the good, I read it on my Kindle, where it asks you for the Goodreads review, the first recommended purchase is the second book.
Smart.
It's like right there. Yep. And that's like probably the most valuable real estate you can be in for.
Because they're going to put something there.
Yeah. Well, they're going to put whatever they think you're most likely to buy.
Exactly.
Because they want their cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty neat to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
What, I had a question. I lost it.
It's okay.
It's been a long day.
A lot of recording today.
Yeah.
And then we came in for more recording. Have you been reading anything good recently? If we want to go back to novellas, we can, but we haven't talked about books we're enjoying.
The Ryan Cahill guy, I've been reading his stuff because I enjoyed it, and I'm just trying to read more self-published.
Cool.
So there's a few on my self-published list that I want to get to. This one guy, Tim McKay, who I've gotten to know a little bit on Twitter. I got his book on Kindle. I'll probably read that next. There's a couple others, and then I want to read the Christopher Rucchio series too.
Nice.
So those will probably be my next.
Yeah, the Rucchio series has been on my list too. It keeps popping up in my recommendations. Yeah, like I said, I just finished Neuromancer. Weird book.
I haven't read it.
I don't know if I recommend it.
Okay.
Like it's one of those books. I mean, it's very cool and it's very interesting.
Sci-fi, fantasy?
It's
What is it?
sci-fi, and the reason I picked it up is that I was looking for near future sci-fi set on Earth with a heavy tech computer component to
Mhm.
it, which, like most sci-fi is space opera-y,
Totally. It's
or
far future.
it's far future, you're on
Yeah.
other planets. And I just, at least right now, I have zero interest in writing that kind of sci-fi.
Yeah.
And there's a lot less that's like near future techy.
Mm-hmm.
And Gibson, the author of Neuromancer, kind of like started the space. And so there's a lot of words that come from that book, like cyberspace. He invented that word cyberspace in Neuromancer.
That's pretty
Kind of
cool.
cool. He also invented the whole cyberpunk genre with Neuromancer,
Yeah, that's sick.
which is also sick.
Mhm.
And there's a video game. Did you play Cyberpunk 2077?
Nope.
Incredible game. And it's heavily based on Neuromancer. And so it was weird reading it because I was like, this is a mission in Cyberpunk 2077. Like, I played this part of this book, which is kind of funny. So it's like, if you liked that game, you might like this book. But the book is weird because it jumps straight into the action in a borderline disorienting way. It has tons of terminology that it never explains. So you kind of have to like learn these words by osmosis as you're going. I was on Grok at a couple points in the book just being like, what the hell is going on here? And it jumps back and forth between physical world and stuff they're doing in the Matrix, which is what they called it, the Matrix, before the Matrix came out, like in cyberspace, which is like, his 3D rendered digital world. They jump back and forth between that with very little signposting that it's happening. And so you're kind of confused about which reality you're in at times. And, there's a lot of like scenes with no setting context that are just like conversations. Yeah. So you feel it's a little trippy of a read, but very cool and like really neat to see how much stuff he thought up back in the 80s. There's also funny, what's the term for this? Is it anachronisms? I can't remember exactly, but there are funny things that he included that make no sense now, looking at it 40 years later.
Then
exactly. So, like, for example, to get into cyberspace, you need a modem.
Yep.
Like, there's no concept of wireless internet.
Yeah.
And so he's like looking for a modem at one point in the book so he can jack into cyberspace. Or there's another where like there's a rogue AI that's hunting him, basically. That's not much of a spoiler. And to mess with him, the AI starts making payphones near him ring. He's like running down an alley and the payphones as he's going are ringing, right? But it's like still probably 50 years in the future from now. But it was hard to imagine a world without payphones. Yeah. So it's funny to see stuff like that. Like, what are we thinking of now or doing now that we're putting in our books that are going to seem ridiculous?
Probably a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be stuff in Husk that in 20 years people are like, oh, you didn't think of this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's fine. Makes a timepiece.
That's a good way to think about it. Just, I wonder if phones will be that way.
Well, yeah, or like Star Trek, their communicators were literally like a flip phone.
Yeah.
That was Star Trek. But it was like a bulky thing you had to call out and pull down like a phone to talk to people when they were jetting around beyond the speed of light. It's kind of fun.
It is fun.
Any other reads?
No, not really. I've been doing so much writing that it's been hard to.
It is hard
to read.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like.
Honestly, the Leviathan Wake series has been really good comfort food for me. They're just so fun.
How many are there?
8, and they're each 180,000 words, so it's a decent commitment to get through them. But again, it's like the characters, the world, the writing is going to be a certain style. It's just very comfortable and easy to slip back into it. So I like that. But I'm trying to do the same as you. I'm trying to read some more self-published sci-fi authors, people who are on Substack and things, because I think of some people to reach out to for interviews.
Yes.
Get some guests on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody listening has ideas for guests you'd like to see us interview,
or if it's you,
yeah, let us know, because we're gonna start doing that. I'm excited for that. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Just get to meet people and ask them questions about all their strategy and stuff. We should do them with Paul at some point. I guess
Maybe
he's
a good
leaving,
one to
but
start with.
yeah, we have to catch him next week.
We can do it
But
on
we can do it. We
online.
can do it remotely too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fine. That's probably easier for,
It is easier for doing like the Q&A stuff.
yeah, sit them right here and just grab
Yeah.
them.
Sky said there's a third chair, so you can do a
Okay.
3-chair setup.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm excited for that. Anything else we should mention before we hop off?
No, I don't think so. I think next, well, depends when I get first bit of feedback
yeah.
from the editor.
Be cool to go over that.
Then as you get towards, I mean, I know you got the fonts and page settings.
Yeah,
and
I got my
stuff.
page layouts. That was cool.
Yeah,
They look really good.
Really good.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So we can talk through all, like, basically everything you're doing now that the book is, I mean, you're not changing words or anything.
I'm not supposed to at this point. So
Are you?
I could if I like really had to, but no, I mean I'm gonna need to build a wiki or something because I'm already forgetting little things that have happened. And so while I've been writing the novella, I have Husk open in another tab
to be able to reference.
to go back and search and be like, okay, how did this character describe this event?
Yeah.
And to like make sure that I stay compliant with that, or to make sure I have an explanation for why things seem different, right? And that's helpful too. And it makes me realize how much other authors must be doing that. It's like, because there's this piece that I just need in the novella that makes it so much better, and I want it in there. And the best way for me to explain it is just that one character was lying in the first book, which is actually a fine explanation because it would make sense for that character to lie in that situation.
There you go.
And
You're playing
so,
it the whole time.
yeah, exactly. Like if you're listening to this, then you'll know that that's the trick I'm pulling in Husk too. But people are probably doing that all the time. Like, you know, I think you just have to.
I think so.
So it's going to make me curious to look for those things in second and third and stuff books now. To be like, I see what you did here.
It's like a cool thing, but also a curse because I want to just enjoy the thing.
Know. Yeah.
And I'm like picking apart what they're doing story wise. But I know a book is really good when I'm not doing that.
Yeah, totally. It's like in Order of the Phoenix when all the time turners get destroyed by a rogue curse. And it's like, we see what you did there.
Kind of smart, though.
Kind of smart. Kind of worked. Yeah, I guess there just weren't any that weren't in the Ministry of Magic.
They're all there.
They're all right
we
there.
We don't know how to make more.
On that one shelf. Can never make more of them.
Sad.
It's real sad.
Yeah.
But I think that's another thing, too, where it's like, if you have readers who are paying close enough attention that they catch little things like that, like you're winning.
True.
You're doing something right.
100% true.
Yeah.
And if it blows up in this big controversy or whatever, great marketing.
That's going to sell books. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you should sign up for Nathan's newsletter at worldbuilders.ai.
I need to change that URL.
Yeah.
I bought it before AI really blew up, and now I get so many stupid spam emails.
Well, I'm sure people think it's like an AI writing.
They think it's like and I'm like, please stop.
Well, it's dangerous in the writing community.
Stuff.
You know, it's like every time I say something nice about AI on Substack, people come after me.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, check out the course. If you haven't pre-ordered Husk, go to huskbook.com, grab your copy there. I think I'm at like 230 or 240 pre-orders now. So
nice.
Kind of cool.
Do you have we should do a whole another pre-order.
Oh yeah.
Like
maybe when we
process, like, okay, launch day did this. How are we thinking about keeping that momentum going? Yeah. That's a hard thing.
Totally. The thing that I have in my head is like, just having those emails is so nice. Being able to ask for a review in the beginning is going to be huge because I mean, especially like, reviews are the number one way people are going to judge a book on Amazon.
I feel horrible when I see a book with less than, I don't know, call it 50.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the actual number is in my head.
It's probably 100.
That popped in. Yeah, something around there. Because I'm like, you can get friends and family up to a certain point.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, like people are really enjoying this. And I do that and I want to support people.
Totally.
And I buy books all the time. And I still find myself doing that. So I bet that's the main way people see it.
Yeah. It's going to be the first thing they ask when they land on it is like, does this look interesting? Does it have enough reviews? And also who recommended it?
Yeah.
Like if you recommended me a book and it had 20 reviews on Amazon,
True.
I'd be excited. I'd be like, ooh, we're
Yeah,
early
new
on this.
find. Yeah.
I remember that with Will of the Many, because the first time somebody recommended it to me, it had like 500 reviews on Amazon. It was really early.
It's also such a, this is also a whole nother episode, but thinking through what are Amazon's incentives to get into their book recommendation kind of algorithm. And my hunch would be it's number of people who land on your book page divided by, or number of people who buy your book divided by number of people who land on page.
Yeah.
So essentially just your conversion rate.
Yep.
Maybe price plays into it.
They've definitely got all of that on their end. It's like, what is the expected value of sending someone to this page?
Yeah.
And we're going to optimize for that.
Yep. And I think to get that conversion rate, which I'm guessing is a high percent, the reviews are number one.
Yeah. So hopefully.
Are you doing like arcs or anything like that?
You know, I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do about that, because they're going to be a lot more. I'm going to have to pay to do them now.
You could just send the Kindle
But I could send the Kindle version. I think I will do that for book influencers, booktubers, bookstagrammers, all of them.
Yeah.
There are some like big names in the social media space who I'm going to send physical copies to. One in particular already asked for one.
Let's go.
I'll tell you offhand, or I'll tell you offline, because if that person reads it and likes it, then it's
huge.
Yeah. So those ones, I'm going to spend the $30 to send them a copy.
Yeah, it's a lottery ticket.
Totally. I'm not going to send out hundreds of free copies the way I did with Crypto Confidential, because I don't have a publisher paying to do it anymore. Yeah. So
makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely Kindle copies though.
Okay. Let's table that for a whole conversation. I think that's one people will be interested in.
Yes. Oh, and I will say, I'll give a shout out to Readwise, readwise.io, my favorite book annotating tool and article reading tool.
It is good.
It is really good. It's really, really good. They're going to do a launch day thing with Husk.
Let's go.
So I think they're going to give I'm going to give them the first act of the book for free to any Readwise subscriber.
Wow.
So they'll be able
Have
to.
they done that before? That's cool.
They've done it with some books. They did it with Pathless Path and some others. Most publishers won't let you give away that much.
Fair. Yeah.
So you can give away a chapter, but that might not be enough to really like get somebody interested. But yeah, I think on launch week, they'll send an email to their list, and anybody can like one click add the first basically 100 pages of Husk to their Readwise reader. And then they can just read it right there. And then I'll have a call to action to buy the rest of the book at the end of it. So that will hopefully be pretty cool. I mean, there's like 200,000 people on that email list. So that'd be sick. Yeah. Perks of self-publishing, man.
Yeah. All right. Whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we'll hold the rest of the marketing stuff for later. Subscribe on YouTube.
Yes.
Do that. Send us ideas for guests. If you have anybody you want us to interview,
we'll reach out to everybody.
Yeah, we're definitely going to reach out. I mean, it's like we're basically starting from zero. Like we have audiences, but we don't have huge book buying audiences. Yeah. So we want to learn everything we can. And if you have recommendations for any self-pub sci-fi fantasy you've really enjoyed recently, send us that too. Or leave it as a comment. Get it to us some way. We'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Sweet.
See you next time.